My name is Andrew Miller, and for over a decade, I believed that my marriage to Catherine was a fortress built on love, trust, and shared dreams. Our modest suburban home had always been a safe haven from the storms of the outside world, a place where every creak of the floor and every whisper of the wind carried the echo of our laughter. Yet, in the quiet corners of our shared life, something sinister was waiting to be uncovered. It all began on a rainy Saturday afternoon when I returned home earlier than usual. The soft patter of rain against the window had always been comforting, a reminder that nature, in its infinite wisdom, cleanses even the darkest corners of our existence. That day, however, the rhythmic sound stirred in me an inexplicable restlessness. Catherine was in the kitchen, her back turned as she hummed a tune I couldn't quite place, a melody that seemed both familiar and hauntingly distant. The house, usually filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of morning chatter, felt oddly silent. I wandered into our small study, a room lined with books and memories, seeking solace in its familiar clutter. As I rummaged through a stack of old magazines on the shelf, my hand brushed against a worn leather-bound journal wedged behind a box of childhood mementos. Curiosity overcame me, and I gently pulled it free. The journal was unmarked on its cover, its pages yellowed by time despite the fact that I knew it hadn't been in our possession long. My heart began to race as I flipped it open, and I was immediately struck by the elegant, looping handwriting that filled its pages. At first, the entries were innocuous, a recollection of small daily moments, a description of a beautiful sunset, or the simple delight of sharing a cup of tea. But as I continued reading, a strange dissonance began to emerge. There were entries filled with anxiety, longing, and an undercurrent of sorrow that I had never witnessed in Catherine. One particular passage caught my attention. She described feeling trapped within the golden cage of a perfect life, a phrase that sent shivers down my spine. I reread the line, trying to reconcile it with the vibrant, caring woman I thought I knew. Over the next few days, I found myself unable to tear my eyes away from the diary. Every spare moment was consumed by its pages, and with each entry, my heart sank a little further. Catherine had hidden secrets, secrets that had no place in the picture-perfect life we had built together. I began to notice the small details I had once overlooked, the way she would lock her phone, the furtive glances she cast over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't watching, the late-night absences she dismissed as work commitments. The more I read, the more the truth began to crystallize before me, each word in the diary acting as a chisel, slowly carving away at the illusion of our marriage. The diary painted a portrait of a woman burdened by an unspoken loneliness, a loneliness that had driven her to seek solace elsewhere. I learned of secret rendezvous, of whispered conversations in the dark, and of promises made to a mysterious person whose name was never fully revealed. My mind raced with questions. Who was she meeting? How long had this been going on? And, most painfully, why had I never sensed it? Each unanswered question added another weight to the growing mass of despair and disbelief that now resided in my heart. In the weeks that followed, I became a silent observer in my own home. I would linger in the hallway, hidden in the shadows, as Catherine left the room with a purposeful stride. The diary's revelations gnawed at me, a constant reminder that the woman I loved had been leading a double life. I began to question every shared smile, every gentle touch. My mind replayed old memories, now tinted with the betrayal I had only just begun to fathom. I felt as if I were living in a world where every moment was both a cherished memory and a painful reminder of what I had lost. As I struggled with the weight of this discovery, I wrestled with a torrent of emotions, hurt, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Yet, amid the storm of my inner turmoil, a part of me longed to understand the reasons behind her actions. Was it a cry for help, a desperate attempt to reclaim a part of herself she felt had been suffocated by our routine life? Or was it merely an act of selfish indulgence that shattered the sacred trust between us? The diary offered no easy answers, only a trail of raw, unfiltered emotion that left me both devastated and strangely curious. One particularly rainy evening, as the storm outside intensified, I sat alone at our dining table with the diary spread out before me. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the pages, transforming the familiar script into an almost otherworldly array of secrets. I reached out and traced my finger over a passage that described a clandestine meeting in a quiet cafe. A meeting that had sparked a connection Catherine had never anticipated. The words were filled with a mixture of regret and longing, and I could not help but feel as if I were intruding on a part of her soul that had been hidden from me all along. In that moment, I made a decision. I would confront the truth head-on, regardless of the pain it might bring. I could no longer allow myself to be trapped in a web of denial and half-truths. The diary had become both a curse and a beacon, exposing the fractures in our relationship while also illuminating a path toward understanding the dark recesses of a heart I once thought I knew. With trembling hands, I closed the journal and vowed that I would seek answers, even if those answers meant dismantling everything I had believed in. That night, as I lay awake in our dimly lit bedroom, the storm outside seemed to echo the tumult within me. Every roll of thunder felt like a forewarning, every flash of lightning a cruel reminder of the secrets that had been hidden in plain sight. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with the implications of what I had uncovered, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The discovery of that hidden diary was not just the unearthing of Catherine's secrets. It was the beginning of the end of the life I thought I knew. I clutched the diary close to my chest as sleep finally claimed me, its pages burning into my memory. Tomorrow, I would begin to piece together the fragments of a love that had been built on lies, and I would confront the reality of a betrayal that had rewritten the narrative of our shared past. In the silent darkness of that night, I realized that some secrets are too potent to remain hidden forever, and that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to liberation. The days that followed the discovery of the diary were filled with a relentless cycle of doubt and revelation. I spent every waking moment revisiting its pages, trying to piece together the puzzle that had shattered the foundation of my marriage. Catherine continued her daily routines as if nothing were amiss, her laughter echoing in the hallways, her smile as radiant as ever. But beneath that familiar exterior, I sensed an undercurrent of guilt and sorrow that she never dared to acknowledge openly. Each entry in the diary provided more details about her secret life, details that were at once both mundane and deeply intimate. I learned of a man she had met at a local art gallery, someone whose name she had whispered only in the dead of night. The diary recounted stolen moments at quiet cafes and long, lingering phone calls that stretched into the early hours of the morning. It was evident that this clandestine relationship was not a fleeting dalliance, but a deeply emotional connection that had evolved over time. The words she had written were raw and unfiltered, revealing a side of her that was desperate for something more than the predictable cadence of our daily life. I began to wonder if I had been blind to the signs. There were days when I noticed Catherine's gaze lingering a moment too long on her phone, or when her eyes darted towards the door as if she expected someone to appear at any moment. I recalled the times when she would suddenly excuse herself from our dinner table with a vague mention of important errands, and how her hands trembled ever so slightly when she thought I wasn't looking. The diary had transformed these minor oddities into painful evidence of a hidden truth. As I delved deeper into her writings, I encountered a passage that chilled me to the core. Catherine described feeling confined by the expectations placed upon her, a life that, while comfortable, felt suffocating. She wrote of longing for passion, for a spark that would reignite her spirit, and for the freedom to explore parts of herself that had been stifled by routine. Her words were poignant and evocative, and for a moment, I found myself empathizing with her internal struggle. Had I been so consumed by the stability of our life that I had neglected to nurture her inner world? The question tormented me, adding yet another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. In the midst of this inner turmoil, I began to secretly document my own thoughts. I started a journal of my own, chronicling the slow disintegration of the trust that had once been the bedrock of our relationship. Every day, I compared my own memories of our life together with the revelations that emerged from Catherine's diary. The discrepancies were subtle at first, a missed detail here, a forgotten conversation there, but as the pages piled up, it became undeniable that a parallel narrative had been unfolding, one that I had never been privy to. I recall one particular entry that seemed to capture the essence of her dual existence. In it, she described a day when she had met the mysterious man at an art gallery, their conversation an intoxicating blend of intellectual curiosity and unspoken desire. She detailed how, for a brief moment, she had felt truly seen, a feeling that had eluded her for years. The vivid imagery in her words painted a picture of a woman who was desperate to break free from the confines of a life that, while secure, felt emotionally barren. Reading those words, I was struck by a profound sense of loss, not only for the future we had planned together, but also for the person she might have been if she had been allowed to explore the full spectrum of her emotions. Days turned into restless nights as I grappled with the implications of her secret life. I found myself wandering the quiet streets of our neighborhood, lost in thought, as if the cool night air might somehow carry away the heavy burden of betrayal. I questioned every moment we had shared, every laugh and every touch, now tainted by the realization that there had been a hidden narrative behind her eyes. I began to notice subtle changes in her behavior that I had once dismissed, the way she would pause before answering a question, the fleeting look of regret that crossed her face when she thought I was not watching. Each detail, no matter how small, was now a thread in the tapestry of deceit that had been woven over the years. I also discovered that the diary was not the only repository of her secrets. In the quiet confines of our bedroom, tucked away in a small drawer, I found a collection of photographs and letters that further confirmed the betrayal. The images were candid snapshots of moments shared between Catherine and the mysterious man, a gentle hand on her shoulder, a laugh shared over coffee, a stolen kiss in a shadowed corner of a cafe. The letters, written in a delicate script, spoke of promises and plans for a future that I had never imagined. With every new piece of evidence, my heart sank deeper into despair. The revelations forced me to confront a painful reality. The person I had loved so dearly had been living a double life, and I was nothing more than a bystander in her pursuit of forbidden passion. The diary had peeled away the layers of pretense, exposing the raw, unvarnished truth of our marriage, a truth that was as liberating as it was devastating. I was faced with the ultimate question: could I ever reclaim the trust that had been so brutally shattered? Or was I destined to wander the ruins of a love that had been built on lies? In the midst of this emotional maelstrom, I resolved to search for answers. I began to compile the evidence, creating a timeline of events that spanned months, each entry in the diary corresponding with moments in our life that now took on a sinister hue. I reached out to old friends and acquaintances, subtly probing for any hint of the other man's identity or of any events that might have signaled a deeper connection between Catherine and this unknown lover. The more I learned, the more I realized that the betrayal was not a sudden, isolated incident, but a carefully orchestrated escape from the confines of a life that had grown stifling for her. As the days passed, the raw pain of betrayal gradually gave way to a quiet determination. I knew that I had to confront Catherine with the evidence, to force an explanation for the secrets that had been hidden for so long. The diary was now both my burden and my guide, a painful reminder of what had been lost, and a key to unlocking the truth that lay buried beneath years of complacency. I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that the coming days would mark a turning point in my life, one that would force me to choose between clinging to the remnants of our past or forging a new path toward a future defined by honesty. However painful that truth might be. The moment of reckoning arrived on a chilly autumn morning when the air itself seemed to shiver with anticipation. I had spent sleepless nights wrestling with my emotions, weighing the costs of confronting Catherine against the agony of remaining in a state of suspended disbelief. With the hidden diary and the accompanying letters clutched tightly in my hand, I resolved that no longer would I allow secrets to govern the course of our lives. Today, I would demand the truth. I found Catherine in the living room, her posture as graceful and composed as ever, yet her eyes betrayed a hint of apprehension when she saw me approach. The morning light filtered through the window, casting long shadows on the floor, a silent metaphor for the hidden truths that had long lurked in the corners of our home. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that would irreversibly alter the fabric of our shared existence. "Catherine," I began, my voice wavering yet determined, "we need to talk." The words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken pain of months spent in denial. Her eyes widened momentarily, and for a brief second, I saw a glimmer of fear and guilt flash across her face before she masked it with a practiced calm. I motioned for her to sit with me at the dining table, the very table where we had once shared dreams and laughter. As we settled into our chairs, I placed the diary in front of her, its presence a silent accusation. "I found this," I said softly, though the tremor in my voice betrayed the storm raging inside me. "I found your diary, Catherine, and with it, a truth that I can no longer ignore." Her hands trembled as she reached for the journal, and for a long moment, silence reigned. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, a countdown to an inevitable revelation. "Andrew," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can explain," but I raised my hand to stop her, my eyes fixed on hers with a mix of anguish and determination. "Explain what, Catherine?" I demanded, my tone growing sterner with each passing second. Explain how our life, the love we shared, could hide so many secrets. Explain why I was kept in the dark while you built a world with someone else. My words tumbled out, each one laden with the weight of betrayal and sorrow. Catherine's face crumpled, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. Between broken sobs, she attempted to recount the story of her loneliness, of feeling stifled by a life that had become too predictable and unyielding. She spoke of the connection she had forged with another man, a connection that promised passion, excitement, and the freedom to be herself in ways that our marriage, as secure as it was, had never allowed. The raw emotion in her voice was both heartbreaking and infuriating, as if the words themselves were an apology for the years of deception. As she continued, I listened in stunned silence, each sentence etching a deeper wound into my heart. The diary lay open before us, its pages serving as a silent testament to the life that had unfolded in secret, a life where every stolen moment, every whispered promise, had been recorded with painful clarity. I recalled the late-night absences, the hurried phone calls, the distant look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. All of it now converged into a single, inescapable truth. I was not the man I believed I was, and our love had been built on a foundation of lies. In that fraught moment, I realized that anger was not enough to mend the rift that had torn our lives apart. I felt a deep, pervasive sorrow for the loss of the dreams we once held dear, the hope of a future together, unmarred by secrets and betrayal. Yet, even amid the pain, there was a flicker of resolve. I knew that I had to reclaim my life, even if it meant accepting the harsh reality of Catherine's choices. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly, more to myself than to her. Why let our love become a tapestry of half-truths and hidden desires? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as tears continued to fall from her eyes. She attempted to explain that she felt suffocated, that the constraints of our daily routines had left her yearning for something more. But her words, no matter how heartfelt, could not undo the damage that had been wrought. The conversation stretched on, a painful dialogue in which each word carved deeper into our shared history. I pressed her for details about the man, about the stolen moments, and she hesitated, her voice trembling as she confessed the extent of the betrayal. With every revelation, my heart broke a little more, yet I could not bring myself to turn away from the truth. In that dimly lit room, with the diary spread before us like a damning record, the fragile remnants of our marriage lay exposed for all to see. In the final moments of our confrontation, I sat in a heavy silence, the only sound the ragged breathing of a woman who had just unburdened her soul. I realized that there was no simple path back from this moment, that forgiveness, if it were ever to be possible, would require a journey through pain and introspection. As I gazed into Catherine's tear-streaked face, I knew that our lives had irrevocably changed. The bonds of trust had been severed, and the future we had once envisioned was now nothing more than a distant memory. That day, as I left our home with the diary clutched tightly in my hand, I felt a mixture of despair and determination. I had confronted the truth, and while it had shattered the illusion of our perfect life, it also marked the beginning of a painful but necessary journey toward understanding and, perhaps one day, healing. I could only hope that in the wreckage of our past, I might find the strength to rebuild a future founded on honesty, even if it meant letting go of everything I once believed in. In the weeks following that fateful confrontation, our home transformed into a landscape of quiet grief and uncertain beginnings. The weight of Catherine's betrayal and the raw truth contained within her diary pressed down on every corner of our once happy sanctuary. I spent countless nights wandering the silent halls, each step echoing with memories of laughter, trust, and a love that now felt irretrievably lost. The confrontation had left scars, wounds that, though hidden beneath a veneer of stoicism, throbbed with the pain of a shattered heart. I found myself standing before a mirror, gazing at a face I barely recognized, a face marked by sleepless nights, deep lines of sorrow, and eyes that reflected the turmoil within. The man I once was, brimming with hope and unyielding trust, had been replaced by someone haunted by betrayal. Yet, amid that profound sense of loss, a quiet determination began to take root. I knew that I could not allow this devastation to define me. I had to find a way to reclaim my identity and rebuild my life from the fragments of a broken marriage. I decided to seek solace in solitude, retreating to long walks in the nearby park where the raw beauty of nature offered a balm for my wounded soul. Each morning, as the sun broke through the lingering haze of dawn, I found a measure of peace in the gentle rustle of leaves and the steady rhythm of my own footsteps. In those moments of quiet reflection, I began to see that the pain of betrayal, as excruciating as it was, held within it the seeds of transformation. It was in the very act of facing the harsh truth that I could, at long last, begin to understand who I was, and who I might yet become. Catherine, for her part, retreated into herself. The vibrant woman I had once known was replaced by a quiet, remorseful figure who moved through our shared spaces like a ghost of the past. We attempted to speak, to mend the threads of a connection that had been so violently severed, but every conversation was tinged with the bitter aftertaste of regret. In the silent pauses between our words, I sensed an acceptance of responsibility, a tacit admission that neither of us could return to the innocence of our early years. Our love had changed irreversibly, and the path to healing, if it existed at all, would be long and arduous. I began to write my own journal, not as an act of vengeance or sorrow, but as a means of chronicling my journey toward healing. With each carefully chosen word, I tried to capture the tumult of emotions that surged within me, the anger, the despair, and, slowly, the glimmer of hope that perhaps this painful chapter was not the end but a prelude to a new beginning. I poured my heart onto paper, revisiting both the bitter memories of betrayal and the soft echoes of a love that once promised a lifetime of shared dreams. In doing so, I discovered that the process of healing was as much about rediscovering myself as it was about understanding the faults in a relationship that had grown too brittle to withstand the weight of secrets. Friends and family, sensing the deep changes within me, rallied around with offers of support and kind words that, although they could not erase the pain, provided comfort in the darkest moments. I found solace in their presence and slowly began to reconnect with parts of myself that had lain dormant under the burden of our crumbling marriage. I took up old hobbies, re-engaged in passions that had once defined my identity, and even allowed myself to laugh again, tentative at first, but with the promise of renewal. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I realized that the process of rebirth required not only acceptance of the past, but also the courage to envision a future free from the chains of deceit. I started to explore new opportunities, both personal and professional, that rekindled the spark of ambition and self-worth that had been dimmed by sorrow. Each new day became a quiet act of defiance against the pain of betrayal, a statement that I would not be defined solely by the mistakes of the past. In the final moments of this turbulent journey, I sat by the window on a clear evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. The diary, once a symbol of shattered trust and painful secrets, now lay closed on a shelf, a silent testament to a chapter that had been written in tears but that had ultimately given way to the possibility of renewal. I acknowledged that while the scars of betrayal might never fully fade, they would serve as reminders of the strength I had discovered in the face of adversity. In that moment of quiet reflection, I vowed to embrace the future with a newfound resolve, to seek a life founded on honesty, resilience, and the lessons learned from a past that had been both cruel and enlightening. The path ahead was uncertain, and the journey toward healing was far from over, but I knew that each step forward was an act of reclamation, a promise to myself that I would no longer be defined by the pain of betrayal. Instead, I would transform it into the catalyst for a life reborn, a life in which the truth, however bitter, was the foundation upon which I would rebuild my identity and my dreams. As I closed my journal that night, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The hidden diary, with all its painful secrets, had inadvertently become the impetus for change. I had confronted the darkness that had once threatened to consume me, and in doing so, I had rediscovered the light that had always resided within. The journey from betrayal to rebirth was a long, arduous one, but I was finally ready to take the next step, a step toward a future where honesty, self-respect, and the courage to face the truth would guide me forward.